King Edward I of England, often called Edward Longshanks, due to his towering height, reigned from 1272 to 1307, and is remembered as one of England's most successful and determined monarchs. Edward was a complex figure, both revered for his military prowess and often criticized for his harshness and ruthless tactics, particularly in his campaigns in Wales and Scotland. Nevertheless, his reign shaped the course of English history and the development of the British Isles. Edward I's long and turbulent reign was marked by continuous warfare, particularly against Wales and Scotland, as well as a persistent struggle for control over the barons and his relationship with the Church. He saw himself as a reformer of both law and the state, and is credited with significant legal and administrative reforms that would lay the groundwork for the future constitutional development of England. However, his aggressive campaigns and his determination to assert his power often led to significant unrest, including resistance from the Welsh and the Scots, as well as tensions with his own nobility. Edward I was born on June 17, 1239, to King Henry III and Eleanor of Provence. He was the eldest son of Henry III, and as such he was groomed to inherit the English throne from a young age. Edward's early life, however, was not marked by the stability of a peaceful succession. Instead, his youth was characterized by significant political upheaval and his involvement in military campaigns, particularly during the turbulent period of his father's reign. Edward's formative years were marked by the political struggles between his father, Henry III, and the barons. Henry's reign was dominated by the barons' frequent rebellions and the increasing power of the monarchy. Edward's role in these struggles began early. In 1258, when Edward was still a young man, his father was forced to accept the provisions of Oxford, which severely limited the king's power and gave the barons greater control. The baronial revolt under Simon de Montfort during the 1260s further set the stage for Edward's future as a military leader. Edward proved his leadership capabilities during this time, particularly during the Battle of Lewes in 1264. The barons, led by Simon de Montfort, defeated Henry III's forces, and the king and Edward were captured. However, Edward's escape from captivity in 1265 and his subsequent role in the defeat of Simon de Montfort's forces at the Battle of Evesham was critical in restoring his father's authority and solidifying his own position as the future king. Edward ascended to the throne in 1272, following the death of his father, Henry III. His return to England from a crusade in the Holy Land, where he had been involved in military campaigns, marked the beginning of a reign that would be defined by warfare, expansion, and the consolidation of royal power. Edward I's early reign was marked by his efforts to consolidate power and strengthen the monarchy. Though he inherited a relatively stable realm, he faced significant challenges in managing the diverse interests of his barons, the Church, and his own ambitions. One of the first actions Edward took upon becoming king was to stabilize England after the power struggles of the previous reign. Edward's government focused on reducing the influence of the barons and strengthening the monarchy's direct control over the realm. His first major reform was the confirmation of the Magna Carta in 1275, which helped consolidate the legal and constitutional reforms introduced during the reign of his father. By doing so, Edward sought to ensure that the English crown operated within the framework of agreed-upon laws and charters, solidifying its legitimacy. Edward's leadership was also marked by his personal involvement in state affairs and his establishment of regular parliamentary sessions. He summoned a parliament in 1275, where both barons and commoners were represented, and began to centralize the administration of justice. His commitment to the rule of law and the use of common law throughout England earned him the reputation as a reformer and a legislator. However, despite his achievements, Edward's reign was also marred by tensions with the barons and the church. His demand for taxes, particularly for his military campaigns, strained relationships with the nobility. Additionally, Edward's desire to maintain direct control over the realm led him to intervene in disputes among the barons and the church, further fueling discontent. One of the defining features of Edward I's reign was his military campaigns, particularly in Wales and Scotland. His conquest of Wales is often seen as one of his most significant military achievements, but it also demonstrated his willingness to use force to achieve his goals. The conquest of Wales began in earnest in 1277, when Edward launched a military campaign to subdue the Welsh prince Llywelyn ap Gruffydd, who had defied English authority. Edward's forces quickly overwhelmed the Welsh, and by 1283, Llywelyn was killed in battle, and Wales was effectively incorporated into the English crown. Edward's response to the Welsh resistance was ruthless. He built a series of castles, including the famous fortress at Caernarfon, to consolidate English control over the region and to intimidate the Welsh population. Edward's approach to Welsh resistance was both strategic and brutal. His extensive use of castles not only provided military strongholds, but also served as symbols of royal power. Edward's conquest of Wales was completed with the annexation of Gwynedd, and in 1301 his son, Edward II, was made Prince of Wales, a title that still exists today. The conquest of Wales had profound effects on the Welsh population, as it imposed English law and governance over the Welsh territories. Edward's policy of English colonization, through the construction of castles and the resettling of English subjects in Wales, is often seen as a key moment in the history of British colonization. Edward's desire to expand and solidify royal power in Britain led him to another conflict, this time with the Kingdom of Scotland. His reign marked the beginning of the Scottish Wars of Independence, a series of military campaigns that would ultimately end in Scottish autonomy and the rise of Robert the Bruce as King of Scotland. The conflict began in 1296, when Edward intervened in a succession dispute in Scotland following the death of King Alexander III. Edward, who had claims to the Scottish throne through his mother, sought to assert his dominance over Scotland. He was recognized as overlord of Scotland by the Scottish nobles, and his first military campaign, the invasion of Scotland in 1296, resulted in the capture of the Scottish capital, Berwick-upon-Tweed, and the eventual deposition of the Scottish king, John Balliol. Edward's harsh treatment of the Scots, including the plundering of towns and the imposition of heavy taxes, fueled resentment. The Scots, led by figures such as William Wallace, mounted a resistance against English rule. Wallace's victory at the Battle of Stirling Bridge in 1297 was a humiliating defeat for Edward, but he regrouped and retook Scotland in 1298, defeating Wallace's forces at the Battle of Falkirk. Edward's military strategy in Scotland was characterized by heavy-handed tactics and the imposition of English control over Scottish territory. However, despite his initial successes, Edward was never able to fully subdue the Scottish people, and after his death in 1307, Scotland gained its independence with the eventual rise of Robert the Bruce and the Battle of Bannockburn in 1314. Edward I's reign was also marked by significant legal reforms that shaped the future of English governance. He is often credited with transforming the legal and judicial systems of England and establishing the foundations for the English common law system. One of Edward's most notable legal achievements was his establishment of the Statutes of Westminster, a series of laws passed between 1275 and 1285 that sought to standardize the law and address various grievances in English society. These statutes addressed issues ranging from criminal law to land tenure, and were designed to strengthen royal authority by providing a more uniform legal system. Edward also expanded the role of Parliament during his reign, making it a more regular and formal institution. Parliament became a key body in the governance of England, with Edward summoning it frequently to address the needs of the Crown and the realm. His summons to Parliament in 1295, which included representatives from both the clergy and the common people, marked an important step toward the development of the English parliamentary system. Edward's reforms in law and governance laid the groundwork for future legal developments and helped to establish the monarchy as a more centralized and efficient institution. King Edward I of England is remembered as one of the most formidable and effective medieval monarchs. His reign was marked by military conquests, legal reforms, and efforts to consolidate royal power. Edward's military campaigns, particularly his conquests of Wales and his involvement in the Scottish Wars of Independence, defined his reign and left a lasting impact on the British Isles.